They mocked her in the courtroom, assuming she was just another reckless youth. But this defendant wasn't who they thought. She had come prepared to change the game. The courtroom was packed beyond capacity, the kind of turnout reserved for headline trials, not a simple pre-trial hearing. A murmur of speculation buzzed through the air as people whispered, their voices blending into a steady hum of judgment. At the center of it all stood a teenage girl, barely 17. Her sneakers let out a faint squeak as she shifted on the polished tile, but her hands remained steady. She didn't look nervous, not the way the judge or prosecution expected. There was no fear in her eyes, no trembling in her fingers. Judge Raymond Calloway adjusted his glasses, peering down at her with thinly veiled irritation. His black robe hung loosely over his broad frame, as if he'd thrown it on at the last second. He exhaled slowly, letting the silence in the room build. "Miss Carter," he said, stretching out her last name like it was some kind of joke. "Do you even understand the severity of the charges against you?" The chatter died down instantly. All eyes darted between the judge and the girl. She didn't hesitate. Holding his gaze with quiet confidence, she replied, "Yes, Your Honor. I do." The judge scoffed, leaning forward, his tone dripping with disbelief. "You sure about that? Because this isn't a school debate. This is a court of law." A few chuckles erupted from the gallery. The girl allowed her gaze to drift over the crowd. Men and women in sharp suits, their expressions carved from stone. They didn't see her as a person, just another name on a docket. She let them stare, but there was something in her eyes, something sharp, something unsettling, as if she knew more than they did. Judge Calloway sighed. "I don't know whose idea it was to let you represent yourself, but I'll say this. You are out of your depth." He waved a dismissive hand. "You're not qualified for this." For a moment, she looked as if she might speak, but instead, her lips pressed into the faintest of smiles. Something in the room shifted, an almost imperceptible tension that made the gallery lean in, sensing an undercurrent they couldn't quite place. The judge mistook her silence for submission. He smirked. "That's what I thought." What he and the rest of the courtroom didn't realize was that they weren't dealing with some frightened kid caught in the system. She wasn't here by accident. She had a purpose, and by the time this hearing was over, they'd all understand exactly why. Still, what could a teenager possibly do in the face of a skeptical judge and a prosecution convinced of her guilt? Calloway tapped his pen against the bench, the sound a slow, deliberate reminder of his authority. "Let's move this along. The prosecution may proceed." The district attorney, Thomas Grayson, rose from his seat, exuding polished confidence. He threw a glance at the girl, his smirk an echo of the judge's. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward case. The facts are indisputable," he began, pacing methodically. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, like he had already written the ending to this story. "The defendant was found in possession of—" "Objection!" Her voice sliced through the room, clear, steady, and completely unexpected. The DA halted mid-step, turning sharply to face her. The crowd stirred, whispers swelling again. Judge Calloway raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering across his face. "Objection?" he repeated mockingly. "Do you even know what that means, Miss Carter?" "Yes, Your Honor," she answered without hesitation. "The prosecution is making an argument based on assumptions rather than facts. That's speculation and should be deemed inadmissible." A ripple of shock moved through the room. The DA narrowed his eyes, thrown off balance. He clenched his jaw before composing himself. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "No," she interjected smoothly. "What's irregular is presenting circumstantial evidence as irrefutable proof." The judge's gavel came down hard. "That's enough," he snapped, his irritation boiling over. "Miss Carter, you are here to defend yourself, not play pretend lawyer. One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." She nodded once. "Understood, Your Honor." Grayson took a breath, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off the moment. He turned back to the judge, forcing an easygoing tone. "As I was saying, permission to approach the bench," she said, interrupting again. The gallery gasped. Calloway shot her a look of disbelief. "You don't make demands in my courtroom," he said coldly. I'm not making a demand, Your Honor, she replied. I'm exercising my right to present a fair defense. However, if that right is being obstructed, I'll file a motion for recusal on the grounds of judicial bias. Silence. Heavy. Unyielding. The judge studied her, his fingers steepled together. He was trying to read her, figure out what her game was. You think you're clever, don't you? He finally muttered. Then, after a long pause, fine. Approach. She stepped forward, the room following her every move, their eyes fixed on her like she was a puzzle they hadn't quite solved. Reaching the bench, she placed a stack of documents in front of the judge. Her hands never trembled. This is a breakdown of the prosecution's evidence, she explained. You'll notice that half of it is based on conjecture, while the remaining items lack proper chain of custody. The judge frowned, flipping through the pages, his irritation shifting into something else, something closer to concern. The DA's face was turning red. Your Honor, this is absurd. She can't just... She can. The judge interrupted, his voice quieter now. He scanned a few more pages before looking back at her. Where did you get this? I prepared it, she said simply. And how does a teenager put together something like this? She hesitated for the briefest moment. Then, with a calm smile, she said, I read. The judge's gaze sharpened, but he said nothing. The gallery, once filled with quiet mockery, now watched in uneasy curiosity. The DA scoffed. Your Honor, this is a waste of time. She's a child. This isn't a classroom exercise. But Calloway held up a hand, silencing him. His focus remained on the girl, his expression unreadable. Who are you really? He asked, his voice quieter now, almost as if he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. She glanced around the room before meeting his stare head-on. I'm not just a defendant, she said, her voice carrying a weight that made the air in the room feel heavier. I'm an attorney. The gallery erupted. Gasps, murmurs, even a few outright exclamations of disbelief. The DA's palms slammed onto the table. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. She's clearly lying. I'm not, she replied, unshaken. I passed the state bar last year. You can verify it. Riley Carter, licensed attorney. The judge stiffened. His gaze snapped to the court clerk. Check that? The air in the room changed, suffocating, expectant. The clerk's fingers flew over the keyboard. The sound of typing was the only thing breaking the silence. And the moment stretched, because now, for the first time, everyone in that room was wondering the same thing. What if she was telling the truth? The courtroom was silent, tension thick in the air. Finally, the clerk looked up, her face pale. It's true, she said. Riley Carter is a registered attorney with the state bar. The room exploded. Gasps, whispers, disbelief. The judge slammed his gavel, calling for order, but even he looked shaken. You're telling me, Judge Calloway said, voice unsteady, that you, a 17-year-old, are a licensed attorney? Riley met his gaze. Yes, Your Honor. I graduated early, earned my degree, and passed the bar exam. The DA sputtered. This is outrageous. A technicality. She's allowed, the judge said, studying her. I've never seen anything like this. Riley gave a faint smile. You underestimated me, Your Honor. But I'm not here for theatrics. I'm here to fight for the truth. The power in the room shifted. She wasn't just a defendant anymore. She was a force. Judge Calloway exhaled. All right, Miss Carter. Let's see if you can back it up. Riley turned to the prosecution. Let's start with Exhibit B. The surveillance footage? The footage places you at the crime scene, the DA said. Does it? Riley raised an eyebrow. The timestamp is missing, and the source is unverified, violating chain of custody. Without authentication, it's inadmissible. The judge turned to the DA. Is this true? The DA hesitated. The footage is reliable. Is it? Riley held up a folder. This forensic report highlights inconsistencies. May I submit it? The judge nodded. Riley handed it over. As he skimmed the pages, his expression darkened. This raises serious concerns. The DA tensed. Your Honor, she's just trying to stall? No, Riley said calmly. I'm upholding due process, something the prosecution overlooked. The gallery murmured, the energy shifting in her favor. She wasn't done. Now, let's discuss Exhibit D, the so-called confession, she continued. It was voluntary, the DA insisted. Under duress, Riley countered. It was signed after hours of interrogation without legal representation. That's a violation of my rights. You didn't request counsel. I didn't have to. Minors are entitled to legal representation. But even if we set that aside, the confession contains errors. The address listed? It's wrong. Public record confirms I never lived there. The judge turned to the DA. Explain this? The DA fumbled with his papers, coming up empty. Riley leaned forward. You assumed I wouldn't fight back. But you were wrong. Judge Calloway raised a hand. Miss Carter, what exactly are you trying to accomplish? She met his gaze. Justice isn't about easy wins or unchecked power. It's about truth. And this case is built on assumptions, not facts. Silence. Finally, the judge spoke. Well, Miss Carter, you've certainly given us a lot to consider. He turned to the DA. Mr. Grayson, the chain of custody for Exhibit B is compromised. Exhibit D is inadmissible. I have no choice but to dismiss this evidence. Grayson's face reddened. Your Honor, with all due respect. With all due respect, Calloway cut in. This courtroom won't operate on weak evidence. Defeated, the DA fell silent. The judge turned back to Riley. Miss Carter, I misjudged you. I assumed you were out of your depth. I was wrong. Riley nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. But this isn't about me. It's about holding the system to its own standards. The judge exhaled. Given the lack of admissible evidence, this case is dismissed. Miss Carter, you are free to go. The gallery erupted, some in shock, others in admiration. Riley gathered her papers and walked toward the exit. Outside, reporters swarmed. Miss Carter, how did you pull this off? What's your secret? She turned to the cameras, voice steady. There's no secret. The law belongs to everyone, not just those in power. People like me, young, underestimated, we belong here too. Today wasn't just about clearing my name. It was about proving that intelligence and determination have no age limit. With that, she walked away, head high. Some watched her in awe. Others whispered in disbelief. But one thing was clear. Riley Carter wasn't just a teenager. She was proof that the most underestimated person in the room might just be the one to change everything. And maybe, just maybe, that's a lesson everyone needed to learn. Riley Carter didn't just win a case. She redefined what was possible. In a system built to doubt her, she proved intelligence has no age, no limits. The underestimated often become the unstoppable. And as she walked away, one truth remained. The law wasn't just for them. It was for everyone.